Ladies and gentlemen, this is Nate Crespo, your host for today and forever, and welcome back to another episode of the Lawyers in the Making podcast, where it is my job to focus on the unique journeys to the law and law school of professionals in the legal field and law students. But let's talk about what we're doing today, because today we have another amazing guest. He's a University of Georgia School of Law graduate and currently works as the owner of law firm GC and as general counsel of Gallery Living. He's also had past positions as a partner at Cravolan and Horst and as a partner at Foltz, Martin, and Knapp. Finally, he is the host of the founding partner podcast. Excited to have him on the podcast today, Mr. Johnathan Hawkins. Welcome to the podcast. How are we doing today? Before going any further, I'd like to say a quick word about the sponsor of this podcast, Rhetoric. Back in episode 25, I had the privilege of having the CEO, Luke Yingling, on the podcast. And ever since that episode, fell in love with the product. Rhetoric takes user briefs and motions and compares them against the text of opinions written by judges to identify ways to tailor their arguments to better persuade the judges handling their cases. Rhetoric's focus on persuasion and helps users find new ways to improve their odds of success through more persuasive arguments. Know more, win more. I was able to see a demo of the product, and its cutting-edge technology and fascinating features make for a product I am proud to sponsor, and further shows the new digital era the field of law has been entering thus far on my journey doing this podcast. If you decide to book a demo, let them know Nate sent you. Be sure to check them out in the show notes below or at userhetoric.com. One word, userhetoric.com. Now, back to the show.
I'm great, man. Happy to be here, Nate. Thanks for having me.
Oh, thank you for coming. I'm excited to have you here today. Now, Johnathan, before we get started, can you tell the audience a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I'm a lawyer here in Atlanta, Georgia. I founded a firm called Law Firm GC about 6.5 years ago. We have a unique firm. We represent lawyers and law firms in their sort of business-related needs. Until maybe about a week ago, we had a new lawyer that does legal malpractice defense. Until he joined us, we did not really do that. We hopefully helped firms avoid it, but if they got sued, then other folks would represent them. So yeah.
Beautiful. Well, let's get right into the journey here, because this is a very interesting one. You started off at Georgia Institute of Technology, otherwise known as Georgia Tech. I forget. Are they the Hornets? Are you the Hornets?
The Yellow Jackets.
The
Close.
Yellow Jackets.
Yeah,
Well,
close.
I should have known these things. See, my brother would be very mad. He knows all the mascots, even for high school teams. He's very good at that stuff. So he'll be very disappointed to hear that. But you majored and got a degree in industrial engineering. You graduated in 1999, and later the following year you would find yourself at the University of Georgia School of Law. So simply put, Johnathan, why'd you go to law school?
Great question. Great question. So my dad, he's retired, but he was a lawyer. So, you might say it's in my blood maybe, but I did not want to be a lawyer, partly because I want to do my own thing. And my dad was a lawyer. I was like, I'm not going to be a lawyer. Absolutely not. I have no interest whatsoever in doing it. And I remember I graduated with an engineering degree. I did not want to be an engineer either. And I just did not know what I wanted to do. So I went to the career services and took all these assessments. I took like multiple assessments, just trying to get some direction. And one of the assessments that came back with the top 10 careers appropriate for whatever my personality is. And like 5 of the 10 were types of lawyers. And I was like, hell no, I'm not doing it. I'm not doing it. Not doing it. So graduated undergrad, and then I sort of embarked on a 1.5 years of sort of traveling and doing different stuff. And so, I mean, I can take you down that rabbit hole if you want, how I actually decided to become a lawyer, but hell, I'll just go ahead and tell you. So
take me down that rabbit hole.
All right. So, a friend of mine, we graduated. So at Tech, you were not required to take a foreign language. It was not, like you could barely graduate in 5 years. You couldn't really graduate in 4 years. It's just all these engineering and math courses, and they did not make us take a foreign language. So a friend of mine who I was graduating with said, "Hey, why don't we go down to Costa Rica after graduation and learn Spanish?" And I said, "Yeah, man, that sounds like a great idea." And so we graduated. We were on quarter systems back there, so I graduated in March. And so we had planned to go basically into May. And so I was making plans, we're going. And then, a few weeks before, he says, I can't go because he was going to Navy flight school. He was supposed to report the following January, but they said, no, you're coming June 1st. So he's like, sorry, man, can't go. And I'd been making plans. I said, screw it, I'm going. So I just went down there by myself. And it was I was down there for about 3.5 months. Best experience ever. It was just incredible. Met people from all over. Had this just great experience meeting, people from everywhere, having intellectual conversations, blah, blah, blah. Wanted to stay there forever. I had a job lined up. They said, you've got the job. But it doesn't start till January. But I ran out of money in September. And I was like, so I had to come back to the U.S. And the plan was I get some jobs here, odd jobs, and then go back to Costa Rica. And I was working here, and then a friend of mine from college said, "Well, I'm going back out to Colorado for ski season. Maybe you should come." So I said, "I'll go to Colorado instead." So I went out there to Beaver Creek to work a ski season, and it was fun. I mean, don't get me wrong, it was fun. But I was sort of coming off the Costa Rica trip, and I was looking forward to having all these intellectual conversations and just broadening my mind. But I got out there and I started hanging out with these 45-year-old ski bums who moved out there when they were 18, and all they were talking about was like the powder, man. And I said, I can't stay here much longer. So that's when I decided I gotta get serious. And I don't know why, but law school is it. So after, towards the end of the season, I left a little early, came back, took the LSAT, and rest is history. Long story. Sorry about that.
No. Listen, we got more than enough time here. But I'm interested. What kind of intellectual conversations were you having in Costa Rica? Not that there aren't any going on there. I'm interested what the substance of those intellectual conversations are. I'm very interested.
I wish I could remember. It was just fun meeting people from all over the world. I mean, people were coming there from all over Europe, South America, all over the States. There's people coming over from Asia. And so I was just expanding my mind in lots of ways. So it was fun.
That sounds like a beautiful time. I can now add Costa Rica on my bucket list. It is a constantly growing bucket list from all the guests. They tell me all these places to go. So I simply write them down, and I'm ready to start traveling soon enough. But let's go into the journey here. You started at the University of Georgia School of Law in 2000. We love talking about the first year. Some people hate it. Some people love it. How was it for you?
It wasn't bad. Like my wife is a lawyer. She loved law school. I'm not that type. I mean, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed Athens. Athens was fun. I mean, it was just way more fun than Georgia Tech. I'll say that. I enjoyed it good enough, but I'm not one of those people that's just in love with the law. I had one of the, at the time, sort of legendary professors was my first year torts professor. He was scary and funny and demanding all at once. And so that was fun, scary, but fun. So yeah, I mean, it was good enough. It wasn't bad. It wasn't bad.
I'm interested now, since you had this background in industrial engineering, not a lot of industrial engineering majors end up in law school, but how was having that background in industrial engineering, doing 5 years of it, and then coming into law school? How did it sort of shape your perspective when you're there? Did it help you? Did it hurt you? What did it sort of bring to the table for you in law school?
I mean, it probably helped me. They teach you, everybody says you go to law school, they teach you how to think like a lawyer. Well, some of it is sort of formulaic a little bit. So, I'd been thinking like an engineer for a while, and Georgia Tech's hard. I mean, it's not a school you go and goof off at. It's hard. And so law school was not as hard as the material, but I was way busier. I mean, it's just the volume of it. It's just all the time, just loading these cases on you to read and this, that, and the other. And so, it probably prepared me. The other thing, every time early on in my career, when I told people I got an engineering degree, went to tech, they said, "Oh, so you're a patent lawyer." And I've never been a patent lawyer. I had no desire to be a patent lawyer. But that was one thing a lot of people thought was going to do.
So in terms of what you did actually do, following your time at the University of Georgia School of Law, you became a judicial law clerk at the U.S. District Court in the Southern District of Georgia. Now, within that experience, as well as any past experience you had throughout law school, did you ever really figure out what you did want to do with law in terms of specialization? But also, did you also narrow down your options, finding out what you don't want to do, especially?
Well, I'm a big believer in niche practice, and I'm a big believer that it's usually discovered through subtraction, trying a lot of things, and you sort of subtract the things you prefer not to do. Um, but yeah, so my clerkship, well, let me back up. So when I went to law school, I thought I wanted to be a plaintiff's personal injury lawyer, contingency lawyer. That's what a trial lawyer, that's what I went to law school to be. And so that's the job I wanted to get straight out of law school, which is virtually impossible to get. It's hard. Not many personal injury firms hire lawyers straight out of law school. They want them to have some experience, some training before they hire them. But I was sort of clueless, and I really, really tried. Couldn't get that. I was lucky and fortunate to have that clerkship, and that was a really cool experience. It was a good in between from the sort of academic law school environment to a more practical practicing law. It's sort of an in between step. So you got to see, our trials and people arguing motions. You got to read a lot of briefing. You got to do that stuff. So some of that was academic, but then you got to see some in practice. There's a whole lot in the practice law that you don't see as a clerk, but it was a good intermediate step. So I loved it. It was a great experience. I did it for a year. A lot of clerkships are 2 years. I think 2 years is too much. 1 year, maybe not enough. 18 months, probably perfect. But yeah, it was good. It was a good time.
So moving forward after that clerkship, you ended up as an attorney at Love and Wellingham. Can you talk about that experience? And still, in terms of that experience and describing that experience, did you figure out what you really wanted to do?
I was still thinking about it. So I wanted to be a trial lawyer. I wanted to do that. My dad had given me some advice. He said, the way he said it, he said, you want street skills. And so he said, early on, try to find a firm or firms that give you a lot of experience quickly. And the way I sort of describe it is, if all the partners are in a plane and it goes down and you had to start your firm the next day, could you do it? And so I wanted to go to a place where I'd get a lot of experience. So that was a good place. That was a medical malpractice defense firm, and they also did some Michelin tire product liability defense. And I was there for about a year and a half, maybe a little less, and tons and tons and tons of depositions. I was flying all over the country doing depositions. I did a couple trials, not first chair, but there with some really good trial lawyers. So that was cool. But I did not like the medicine. I didn't like it. Back to my tech days, I was here in Atlanta, and a lot of my friends from undergrad were here, and they were going into business for themselves. They're doing real estate, they're doing construction, they were doing all sorts of things. And I was interested in business. I'd always been interested in business. So I wanted to pivot to do some sort of business law. So looked for firms that did sort of business litigation, and that's what I ended up pivoting to. And the other thing I've always liked is just sort of trying to develop business. And it's hard to develop a medical malpractice book of business. That's insurance driven, where if I moved into business, I had all these friends who were in business in this city. So that was attractive to me too. So I wanted to go to a smaller firm where I had the ability to continue to get the street skills on the legal work, but also the street skills where I could begin to try to develop business. So, the big firms, the really big firms, great firms, great lawyers, you can learn a lot there, but it's a lot harder to develop business as a young lawyer. The types of matters that a young lawyer might get are too damn small, and the firm's like, hell no, we're not taking that. So the whole matter is worth 2 hours of your time if you're billing on this big one. So
Now, and speaking of these street skills, what would you describe as these street skills, and what are some examples of some important street skills you should pick up on while you're going through these various experiences throughout your lawyer career?
Well, part of it depends on what your practice area is or what you want to do. So if you're a litigator or trial lawyer, you got to learn how to take it. I mean, obviously, you got to learn how to draft briefs and draft a complaint, but you need to learn how to take depositions. You need how to argue motions. You need to learn how to try a case as soon as you can, if that's what you want to do. If you do some sort of transactional, you need to learn how to run a deal. So I think transactional probably takes a little longer because there's just more pieces to it. I think it's a little more complex. You need a little more experience, but you need to learn how to do your craft. So that's one thing. That's one street skill. Another, it's other things. Learning how to talk to clients, learning how to manage expectations, learning how to get clients. You can't. I mean, you can be the best lawyer in the world, but if you can't get clients, what are you doing? So you got to learn how to do that, and then eventually, you can. That's enough to probably land at a firm and do well. Since going out on my own 6.5 years ago, building a firm is a completely different skill set, completely different. It's fun and it's challenging, but it's completely different. So that'd be part of the street skills too. We can get into that later.
So moving forward in your career, you then became, I'm assuming you didn't become a partner instantly, but you started at Foltz, Martin, and Knapp. You were there from 2006 to 2013. So can you talk about that experience? And can you also give some tips of how to climb up that ladder, become a partner? What are some things people should do in order to do it?
That was a really fun firm. I had a great time there. We had a really good group of young associates, and we just had a good time. I mean, that was just a really fun experience. It's probably my favorite firm ever. And it, got to develop, got to learn a lot of things. But, I think at that firm particularly, and probably a lot of small firms, the way to make partner is you've got to develop business. I mean, you've got to be able to do that. It does a couple things. Number one, you should just know how to do that. I mean, not everybody's good at it. I get that. But if you can do it, you should try to do it. And once you do that, you start to chart your own path, because you start to become in demand, both at the firm, where you're practicing, and then to other firms out there that want somebody with a book of business. Or you have a third option, you start your own firm. But it starts to open up options for you. And, I was fortunate I was able to develop business, and that's really why I was able to become partner there.
So you developed your business, you're getting all these opportunities. And one of the opportunities you took, you became a partner at Krevelin and Horst. I hope I am not butchering those names. I most definitely am. Am I butchering them?
It's Krevelin and Horst.
Okay, I was close.
You're close. You're close.
I can do so much better though. But you were there from 2013 to 2018. You were there for 5 years. How was that experience? And getting that book of business, having all that confidence, how was going into there? You've established yourself. So how was coming in, being a partner and working there? How was that experience?
So that's interesting. So Foltz Martin, the reason I left was the firm dissolved. It basically there was a group that broke off, and that started sort of a cascading series of events that basically ended with the partners voting to just shut it down. I'll tell you, that was a funny story. So I made partner in January that year, officially became partner in January. The group that left in January. So basically, as I became partner, this group broke off. And so I started to be in the partner meetings. And it was just like, it was crazy. It was crazy to see it. And it's like, what the hell is going on here? Fast forward, there was a few months of everybody, partners talking, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? The lease was going to end at the end of that year. And everybody's doing soul searching about, do we keep going? Do we bring in somebody else? Do we move on? Blah, blah, blah. And so we had this partners meeting in May. And the agenda was, we're going to meet to decide what we're going to do. And keep in mind, I'm the youngest partner, the newest partner. I'd barely been there in the partnership meetings. And so we go into that meeting, and, managing partner opens the meeting. He says, all right, we're all here. Everybody's going to talk about what they think and what they want to do, la, la, la. And then he turns to me and he says, Hawkins, you're going first. And I'm like, what the hell? I just got here. Start with the other people. I found out later that a few people knew that he was going to do that, but they gave me no warning. So I'm in there just like, blah, 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 what do I say? And then finally I just said, look, I don't want to sign another lease. I'm going to go somewhere else. And then we went around and, basically everybody came to the same conclusion, but I had to go first. And so about two or three of us went from that firm to Crevlin. And because I had the book of business, I was able to move over as a partner. And that firm is a really good firm. They're still around. They're doing really well. Since I've left, they've grown a ton. And so I continued to develop the niche practice I have now there. I started it at Folds Martin, really developed it more at Crevlin. And when I went out, it was ready. So
Now we finally get to the moment after 2018. Starting in 2018, you founded and you became the owner of law firm GC, hanging your own shingle. So can you talk about that process? And as we always do on this podcast, from the very first time I ever heard someone hanging their shingle, it is a very struggling experience, and there's a lot that goes into it. So can you talk about the experience of hanging your own shingle and the struggles that came with it?
yeah, so mine is an interesting story because so I had a friend of mine from undergrad, Georgia Tech, who was a longtime client. He and his dad and his brother had a company developing and operating senior living communities. And I had always talked to him. We'd always talked over the years about maybe doing something in business, and we had experimented with some things, and nothing really ever caught fire. But he and his dad and his brother were selling their last property together, and they were going their separate ways. And he said, "Hey, you interested in coming and joining? Because I want to keep going. I'm not ready to stop." And so we started talking, and so I left my last firm really to join as general counsel of his development company. But it was sort of starting over as like a startup again. And he's sort of like, "Look, I can pay you a little bit, but you're gonna have to figure out the rest." And so the deal was I would keep sort of a small law practice and then go in-house. And to be honest, my intention at the time was that I was just going to shut the practice down eventually as the senior living thing grew. And so my law practice was pretty small. I was able to cut out a lot of it and really focus on my niche practice. And I call it a lifestyle firm. And I did a little, but not a lot. I had like zero overhead, 90 something percent profit margins. I mean, it was incredible, really. And that's what I did for a while. Now, eventually, and we can maybe talk about why in a minute, but eventually that law practice started growing organically. I wasn't really marketing it. I had a website, but I wasn't really marketing it, but just based on a lot of past efforts and past clients and all these things, I just more and more referrals started coming over the years. And then at some point I was like, all right, I got to make a decision. Am I going to grow this thing, or am I going to be turning away a bunch of work? And so about 2 years ago, I decided, all right, let's try to grow this firm. So that's sort of where I am now.
So why did you decide, let's grow the firm?
Great question. So I spent, I've been doing this sort of niche practice representing lawyers, really started maybe 15 years ago or so, the kernel of it. And I've busted my tail to develop it. And really, at least around here, got a name for myself for what I do. And I remember I was at the gym one morning listening to a lawyer podcast, and it just hit me. I said, you know what? I've developed this niche. I've busted my tail to do it. It would be a shame not to grow it. And there's really not a whole lot of people that do this. I mean, there are hardly any. And so part of me was just, I told myself, if I'm on my deathbed and I don't go for it, I'm going to regret it so much. And I don't want to regret it. I may not do it, and I may fail, but I'd rather fail instead of regret it. I want to try and fail instead of regret trying. So I remember it vividly. That morning, I said, I'm going to do it. And it was almost fear is probably the wrong word, but it was a sort of a negative emotion. I mean, I was excited about it, but it was sort of like, it was a negative emotion that really sparked me. The negative emotion of, if I don't do it, I'm going to just regret it.
Now that sort of thinking framework, that decision framework of I'm sitting on my deathbed and I look back on my life and there's many things I could have done, but I didn't do it. Do you use that framework for all your decisions that you make, and do you suggest people do the same?
I wish I could say it's some framework I use. It was just something that happened in the moment. So, no, I don't think that's something I use a lot, but it worked for this. And it's been driving me. I mean, I'm excited about now. It's turned from a negative, that moment of a sort of a negative emotion, to a really positive one now. I mean, you know, we've got a pretty big vision, and we think, and we're getting there. It's the other interesting thing is, you want to get there fast, but sometimes you got to slow down. You got to build the foundation before you can build up. And so we've spent a couple of years really building a foundation, and it's starting to take off a little bit. So
That's a great segue. My next question is, what does the future hold for your law firm GC? What do you foresee? Or what would you like to happen? What are your goals in terms of this law firm growing and the way that it's growing? What do you foresee in the future, and what do you want to see?
oh, it's big, man. It's big. Yeah, so we're based here in Atlanta. I want to create a national platform for this firm. I want to create beachheads in other states, and I want this to turn into a national practice. And I've got specifics sort of in my mind that I think, but life drops opportunities in your lap in different ways that you're not expecting, and so I'm ready to pounce when the time comes. So yeah, so we've, like, for example, this year compared to last year, we will have doubled our revenue this year, and we will have doubled our attorney count. And when you're small, that's easy. I mean, easier. As we continue to grow, we're not gonna be able to do that. I think we'll try to double again next year, at least in revenue. And then after that, it'll probably slow down. I mean, it's impossible to do that every year forever. But yeah, in my mind, I've got some strategies on how to get there, but also opportunities come. So I just got to be ready to jump on them.
Of course. I mean, listen, I love the ambition. Double it every year, continue to double it. Obviously, like you said, starting small, you go from 1 to 2, you doubled it, yeah. But, once you get into the bigger numbers, you start going from 20 to 40, maybe you're making $1 million. Now you're making $2 million. Now that becomes 4. And then that's, the hockey stick. The hockey stick grows and it goes and goes. And it's that exponential growth. They love that in the startup industry as well as the law firm industry. Now, you yourself are also a fellow podcaster. We have here, you are the host of the Founding Partner podcast. So what do you talk about on that podcast, and why did you decide to make it in the first place?
So we interview, or I interview, founders of law firms. And the way I look at a law firm, it's an evolution, it's a journey. So it may start with one attorney and grow up to, hundreds of attorneys. And so on my journey to grow and scale, I wanted to learn from everyone else who's done it and who's doing it. So part of it was, probably like you want to interview lawyers and see about law school. I wanted to interview founders of firms and hear about their struggles and wins and lessons learned, and the way they did it. Especially people who were ahead of me. That's who I wanted to learn from. But it's turned into sort of, we're there to serve an audience, and there are people that are all along at different points of the journey. And so there's some people who want to start a firm, who haven't done it yet, or there are people who just started a firm. And so I've interviewed folks that, have grown from, I think a few weeks ago, I interviewed somebody that started with 8 lawyers, and now they're up to over 300, maybe close to 400, 26 states over the last 25 years. Impressive. But then I was hearing from people who said, I like hearing from those people, but they're so far ahead, it doesn't translate for me. I would love it if you interview people who are earlier in the journey. And so we try to do that. So I've interviewed folks who have just started their firms. And then another thing I like to interview there is to explore different business models and business side hustles that lawyers have. So there are folks that have subscription programs or, all types of hourly, flat fee, contingency. There are people who have education-based sort of companies that they sell to other lawyers or sell to clients. It's a lot of cool things that you can do in the law other than sort of the traditional, hey, go work at a big firm and bill a bunch of hours.
I love that you're talking about journeys. It seems like I stole your idea. You know what I did, Jonathan? I stole your idea for the podcast. That's exactly what I did. I had no idea what it was, but there was some influence there, of course. But as I love to talk about on this podcast, of course, as I say millions of times, as I just said on the last episode I just recorded, I'm going to start keeping account of how many times I say this. But of course, there's no straight path to law or law school. There's only your unique journey. And you're doing the unique journeys of the founding partners and how they grow their firms and how they may be starting to grow their firms, how they're exploring their journey currently in present time. So I think it's a wonderful idea. I need to now listen to some episodes, get myself informed on some founding partners. But I also found that you love reggae. Now, it's an interesting point that you love reggae. You got that deep Southern accent. You don't expect that from someone like you, but where does this love of reggae come from?
Well, like with a lot of people, Bob Marley was the gateway into the reggae scene. And I don't know, man, I just love it. I mean, I'm a drummer. Well, I say I'm a drummer. I was a drummer in growing up and a little bit in college. I have a drum set. I can't say I play all that much anymore, but I still identify as a drummer. That's my aspiration. And so I love music. But there's just something about reggae that just gets me. It's the rhythm. It's almost like trance-like to me. It's mellow, not all of it, but a lot of it's mellow. I just love it, man. It's just, and the other cool thing, like a Bob Marley or even some of the newer stuff, you've got, you might have 12 people on the stage and one of the guys or gals, their sole thing is just hit a cowbell every now and then or some little thing or a tambourine, and it all fits together. And it's simple. It's not like jazz, super complicated, but when it all gets pieced together, it's really something else. I love it. And there's a lot of good reggae out there. A lot of good stuff. It's different than, what you would think of with the Wailers and Tosh and Marley and those guys.
Funny enough, one of my best friends, Nick, he loves reggae music. Whenever we're hanging out, we'll be playing like poker. He'll just play reggae music the entire time. Some people are annoyed by it. I actually enjoy it a lot. I love the mellow tones, just like you said. It's got a great vibe to it. It's like a great piece of art. You got all these distinct little parts about it that bring it together and make this beautiful piece of music. It's a very beautiful thing. It's such a nice art form to sort of divulge in every so often. But you also, I saw on your page as well, I was doing some snooping. I always love doing a little snooping. But you have a weekly newsletter as well. So talk about the weekly newsletter. Where can people find it? And what do you talk about on there?
Sure. So I have a weekly email newsletter that I send to it's primarily lawyers, although there's some folks that are not lawyers that sign up for it. And it's sort of a weekly short and sweet tip to help lawyers in their law practice. It's by design, very short and sweet. I know I get some emails from lawyers that are, law review article type emails, and it's just delete. And so mine, there's lots of space. There's no graphics. It is one point and you get right to it. And it's like, boom, you can almost look at the entire email on your iPhone to see if you want to look at it or not. I try to provide a lot of value. And really, I'm sort of writing to myself, what are things that I have discovered or seen or wish I knew, or learned from other people. Again, sort of along the journey, it's of being a lawyer, being an owner, just practicing law. And so that's what it is. And so you can find that. What's the easiest way to find that? If you go to my LinkedIn page, and if anybody listening, I encourage you, I'm on LinkedIn a lot. I think I post every day. Go there, find me, send a connection request. I will accept it. And then on my profile page, there's a button you can hit to sign up for the newsletter. And I promise it's not super annoying. So please
Well,
sign
the,
up.
the beauty of it all, Johnathan, is first, I can confirm that Johnathan does accept your connection invite. He accepted mine willingly. I thank him very much for that. But all of Jonathan's stuff, his podcast, his newsletter, will all be in the description below. So if you're interested, it is down there, one click away, just one click, put in your email, and now you're on the newsletter. I will be signing up later today. Don't you worry, Johnathan. And when I see it, I can confirm to everyone that is only one page. There's not a lot of reading to do. It's straight to the point. It's a beautiful thing. And I forgot to say, in speaking about music, you are in the music capital of the world for me, Atlanta, Georgia. All my favorite rappers are from there. They all sing there. A lot of the people that I know in the industry itself, my brother does some stuff with music, so I know a lot of rappers down there. It's very, very nice. My favorite rapper, Playboy Carti, is from Atlanta himself. So I love Atlanta more than you could really think, honestly. I can't wait to get down there eventually.
Well, let me tell you. So in college, this was so Georgia Tech is in Midtown, and the interstate is right next to Georgia Tech, and underneath the interstate is this tunnel. I don't know if you how much time you spent in Atlanta Midtown, but there was a time, probably about a year and a half in college, where on Thursday nights there was this club. If you walked through that tunnel, right on the other side of it was this little club, and at the time it was called the Yin Yang Cafe. And on Thursday nights, there was this ensemble of studio musicians that would play. It was called, the drummer was Lil John Roberts, who is phenomenal.
Nice.
He's the touring drummer at the time, was a touring drummer for Janet Jackson, and just a badass. I mean,
That's
unbelievable.
incredible, honestly.
So on Thursday night, they would call it Lil John and the Chronicle, and it was acid jazz is what they'd call it. And tiny little club. We would go there early, me and a few friends, and get that front table, so we were right there. And every week it'd be a different ensemble. There might be 3 guitarists one week, and then 3 keyboardists the next week, whatever. And then all these musicians who were in town or whatever, who were there in the night, there'd be a section where they could come up on stage, and then they would play with the band. Then they would open it up to anybody else who wanted to get on with their instrument, and then the band would push them as hard as they would go. It was unbelievable. And Lil John, I mean, most drumming, I can hear it and I know what they're doing. Now, some of the really good ones, you're like, okay, let me see it. And then you see it, and you're like, okay, yeah, I know what they're doing. Well, Lil John, I'm like literally 5 feet from him, staring intently. I have no clue what he's doing because his hands are moving so fast and doing some crazy stuff. And he would do these solos that would just get off beat, but the rest of the band would keep the beat. And then, I mean, measure after measure after measure after measure. And then I was just lost. And then all of a sudden, boom, he's right back on it. It was just unbelievable.
I mean,
Unbelievable.
that's incredible. And this is like the Lil John, like the
No,
no
not the
different guy.
rapper. Not
Okay,
the
yeah, I was
rapper.
gonna say, I'm like,
No.
wait a second. I'm like, I didn't know he's a drummer.
Not the rapper. This is Lil John Roberts. He's the
Okay, okay.
drummer. He's the drummer.
Still a
He was
legend
originally
himself.
from Philly, but yeah, I think he lives here in Atlanta now.
Well, that's just fantastic, and that is an incredible experience. Those things, like something in a tunnel. Usually, you're gonna find something very, very valuable in those things. It's tucked away in the corner. No one really knows that it exists, but those people who know that it exists find it very, very valuable themselves, and clearly you did. So that's a tremendous story. I mean, that is just amazing that that exists in Atlanta. But one last thing, you have the 6 golden rules of client retainer agreements. I saw that it said golden rules, and I love golden rules. Kant, not my favorite philosopher. I really don't like him, honestly. But he did coin the golden rules. So can you talk about the 6 golden rules of client retainer agreements and what exactly is that? Because I'm interested.
Well, I might have to pull this up. I'm not sure I remember them all, but you know, for example, you got to define who the client is. You always want to define that, and it can get complicated. Is it the owner of the business, or is it the business? Is it the mother, or is it the child? Is it is there an estate? It can get confusing, and it's some pitfalls for a lawyer, because if you are not representing the right person and people have misunderstandings, then you can find yourself in a bad spot, either conflicts or malpractice or whatever. So that's one thing you want to put very clearly in your engagement letter so everybody knows and there's no misunderstanding. Another is, along sort of the same lines, is you want to define the scope of your engagement. I've seen it a lot. Clients get a misunderstanding about what's included and what's not, and that can cause a lot of problems too. And also, you may end up doing a lot of work for free. I'm all for pro bono, but on purpose, not on accident, right? So there's a few more in there. If anybody wants to get that, you can, again, that's on my LinkedIn page. There's a link to get that. And I wish I could remember the rest as we're sitting here, but.
Law students, are you feeling overwhelmed, stressed, or short on time in law school? Maybe you just want someone to show you a step-by-step framework to master the topics you're learning in your classes. I know the pressure you're under, and I've got the perfect solution for you. My course, The Law School Operating System, is proven to help you conquer law school with confidence and ease.
Created by Lisa Blasser, a former guest on the podcast and founder of the Law School Success Institute, this course breaks down every subject into manageable main topics that you run through a comprehensive study system to thoroughly prepare you for class and final exams. No more feeling like you need to know everything all at once in the beginning.
But that's not all, Nate. The Law School Operating System also teaches you how to schedule your studying and time effectively. For every topic, you'll know which study step you're on and when you'll complete it every week of your semester. No more mad dash cram sessions, more time with your loved ones. And with my system, you'll walk into your exams knowing you've given 100% of yourself, that there's nothing more you could have done to succeed, and there's no better confidence than that.
Lisa breaks it down like this: one class, one list of main topics, and one system to master each topic. With recorded and live sessions for students available on her website and partnerships with law schools nationwide, the Law School Operating System is here to help you thrive from day one to the final exam. Ready to take control of your law school journey and operate at your full potential in law school? Visit www.lisablasser.com today and enroll in the Law School Operating System. Be sure to use code LSOSNATE10 at checkout for 10% off the recorded course. That is code LSOSNATE10 at checkout. Now, back to the show. So, right, I put you on the spot there. I didn't mean to put you on the spot there, but whenever I find something with a very interesting name, I always have to ask about it. Always, always, always. I love the interesting names, the interesting titles, because you put a little bit of thought into it, but it makes a big difference. Now, Johnathan, we are now down to our last 5 questions. The first of the 5 questions is something I've seen throughout the entire journey of doing this podcast, that the legal field is moving in a certain direction. People are adopting new AI technologies, new software technologies into the new world that is emerging in the legal field. Now, this is the tech stack question per se, but what does your tech stack look like? What kind of technologies, new or old, whatever they may be, do you have to suggest to the audience, and what do you recommend to people out there?
Well, I'm in the middle of transitioning my tech stack. I don't want to throw any current softwares under the bus, so I just won't mention those. But I am in the middle of transitioning, and part of that is because we're growing, and so we just need something else. What used to work is not really working anymore. But also we are looking to the future. As I said, we've got a big vision, and so I want to put in a software stack that can grow with us. And so I'm currently shopping around and demoing a lot of stuff. So I would not disclose what we're using now, because we're not going to be using it. January will be something else. So, and I don't know what that is yet.
Well, listen, you're not being deposed here, so you may plead the fifth on this one, which is totally okay. But for the last question here, Johnathan, live on the Lawyers in the Making podcast, what are your book recommendations for people? Doesn't have to be about the law, just some of your favorite books you've ever read, something you give a gift to someone.
Well, one you hear a lot about, I'm sure people have said it on this show, Buy Back Your Time. That's a big one. that's definitely sort of will change your view on things. A non-law book, one that I've recommended many, many, many times, The Fourth Turning, I think is just incredible. I don't know if you've read that. It's sort of this generational theory of history. And that book was written early 90s, maybe, or published early 90s. And they predict have you read this?
I haven't. I've never read this book.
Okay. They predict what we are going through right now. It is uncanny. The predictions made in that book. It is crazy. That's all I'll leave it with. It's really interesting. It's really two halves.
Don't spoil.
It's divided. It's written by these demographers. The first half is sort of boring. It's all their methodology, blah, blah, blah. You could skip that. I mean, you could sort of skim through it. The second half of the book is where all the good stuff is. It's just amazing. So that is one. Absolutely read it. Now they catch a lot of flack. A lot of people say, "Oh, it's a bunch of BS." Well, it looks good to me. I mean, they predicted it. At least make you think differently about things.
Well, I'll tell you what, Johnathan, it will be in my Amazon cart soon enough. I keep putting so many books in there. My parents are becoming concerned with my habits. They're like, "Nate, how are you reading all these books?" I'm like, "Listen, it's just interesting." What I tell them, you buy the good books, they're very easy to read. You buy the bad books, you're gonna have a hard time reading it because it's not a good book. So I only read the best. And I take your recommendation very seriously. So I'll be reading it soon, and I'm very interested into what these predictions are because I love the predictions. I love history as well. So it seems to it's like a match made in heaven for me over here. But
and I'll say there's a sequel that just came out. It's called The Fourth Turning Is Now. I have not read that one yet. My wife's in the middle of it now. I'll read it next. But yeah, so there is a sequel, but you got to read the first one, The Fourth Turning, before you read the new one.
All right. Yeah, you've piqued my interest, Johnathan. You absolutely have. Now, third to last question here. What are the sorts of things that you consume, not food, consume on a daily basis, either that be through social media, so Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, Reddit, YouTube, Facebook. I don't know only old people use Facebook apparently nowadays. I don't actually, but it's okay. Any podcasts that you listen to that you recommend to people, any Substacks that you read that you recommend to people, any people on LinkedIn you recommend? What is crossing the transom of Johnathan's mind on a daily basis?
LinkedIn is great. I mean, that's how we connected. You know, I'm super active on there. There's a lot of good free lawyer content on LinkedIn. There's so many that I can't name them all, but there are tons of really good ones. And I could start naming, but I don't want to offend anybody if I leave them off because I'll forget. But there's some really good people on there. Absolutely should get on there. I like to lurk on Twitter. That's where I get. I am big into finance and other things like that. And so there's people there that I follow. I get a lot there. I try to stay away from politics on anything, but it comes up every now and then. But that's where I probably get some of my news. Although I don't watch the news, I don't read the news. I gave that up a while back, and my mental health went way up. People said, "What are you talking about? You won't know what's going on." And I said, "If it's important enough for me to know about it, somebody will tell me." So that's my attitude. There's just a lot of noise in the news. You know, one day they say one thing, and then 2 weeks later, like, "Oh yeah, we got that wrong." So it's like, just if it's real, it'll get to me eventually. What else? A lot of podcasts. I listen to a lot of podcasts. A lot of legal podcasts. I have my own. Yours. I mean, there's lots of great legal podcasts out there. You know, I don't know if you've talked to Tom Tona yet. He's got a good one. I really like Tom's. I mean, there's so many. But then I'll listen to some other types of podcasts. So another good one. This is more of a finance / geopolitics type podcast. It's called Hidden Forces. Have you seen that one?
I have not.
That one is really good. So that's a good one. And he has a sort of a free first half, but you got to pay for the second half. So if you really want all of it, you got to pay for it. It's not much, $15 a month. Really good. Definitely listen to that one. My First Million. That's like, One of the best. Love those. I get something out of every episode. That's a great one. What else? I look at YouTube every now and then. I've got a YouTube channel. Eventually I'll try to grow that. So anybody out there, please go find my YouTube channel and subscribe. I will. I drop all my podcast episodes on there, but I will be adding some more talking head stuff at some point. So please, anybody out there, go subscribe. What else? I don't know. I think that's about it.
Yeah, I mean, listen, more than a sufficient answer. It was very, very, very well. I got a lot of new recommendations, new podcasts that I can listen to, new people to reach out to. Tom Tony, never heard of him in my life. Now I do. You're on my radar, Tom. But
you'll have fun with Tom. You'll have fun. He's a good guy.
And of course, My First Million, the crown jewel of my podcasting experiences. That is by far one of my favorite podcasts that I listen to. Sam and Sean. And funny enough, second to last question was stolen right from the My First Million team very, very few months ago. Shampuri had actually dropped a Google Doc with a bunch of questions that you could ask people. So then I stole one of the questions, and this is exactly that question. You're working all the time, but what does an ideal Friday night and Sunday morning look for Johnathan?
Friday night, man. Every Friday night, my wife and I go to this taqueria joint. It's called Taqueria del Sol. It's an Atlanta institution. It's sort of a Southern inspired taqueria joint. They have specials every week, so it's always changing. And they make the best skinny margarita in town. So we go there every Friday night. So we'll go there tonight. Sunday morning, I work out. I go to the gym every day, or work out, do something active every day. And so Sunday morning, I go to the gym and, round out my weekend that way.
Listen, there's nothing like the gym. As I tell people, some people go to church for the time of worship. I go to the gym. It is my place of worship. I go there, I work out, and I have so much fun doing it. Get to just black out all the noise, lift some weights for a little bit, grunt a little bit, get a little larger. That's what I love doing. Now, before we get to the last question, I have to ask, now the people out there can't see this, but I can. What are those stick figure, I guess, pictures or art in the back? What is that? I need to know.
So those are concert posters with signatures on it, but Stick Figure is one of those new reggae bands. Another one's The Movement. They're badass, man. Your listeners got to go check them out. It's not like what you think reggae. It's a little different, but it's really good. So,
I mean, listen, if I saw that picture, I'd have to click on their music and listen because they're beautiful. Those are beautiful, beautiful pictures. So I just had to ask. I've been looking at them the entire time, and I've been waiting to ask that question. So I'm glad I did. Now I got to go find out what's good with Stick Figure. Now, last question here, Johnathan. I do this at the end of every single episode, but what are your words of wisdom for the aspiring law students, the current law students, and the legal professionals out there in the world?
Oh man, there's so much I could say, but I would say this for law students. I mean, for actual law students or people going to law school. Let me back up. So, how to choose a law school. You want to hear my take on that?
Absolutely.
Okay. How to choose a law school. And this was given to me by my dad, and it was actually, I think, really, really good advice for me. It doesn't fit for everybody. I'll tell you the exceptions at the end. But private law schools are expensive as hell. You come out with an albatross of debt, and it limits your options. And if you hate practicing law, you're screwed, right? Now you can go to a big firm, work your tail off, and pay them off quickly if you get into a big firm. But there aren't that many jobs there. So the advice that was given to me, pick the state you want to live in first. Go move there and make sure you're an in-state resident. So you got the in-state residency. Then go to the big state school. And some states have more than one, but go to the big state law school and you get in-state tuition. So it's a cheaper deal. I mean, maybe you get a scholarship too. But the other good thing about it is if you're going to live in that state, your classmates are likely all going to stay in that state with you. And as you grow in your career, they will become your colleagues, your partners, your referral sources, your judges. They become state legislators. They become governors. All the folks in a really strong, powerful network that you would want will come from your law school time. And then that leads to the second piece of advice. And that is, get to know your law school classmates. Don't be an asshole. You don't have to be friends with everybody, but, don't make enemies. So, get to know your folks and treat everybody right. Now, the exceptions to going to the in-state school, there are certain career paths that may be better to go to a different type of school. So if you want to be on the U.S. Supreme Court or clerk for the U.S. Supreme Court, there's a handful of schools you got to go to. You just got to. If you want to work in high levels of the federal government, there are probably certain schools that would make that a little bit easier than others. So that, there are exceptions. But even a really good, strong state school, you can go to a nice big, white shoe firm if you want. So just because you go to the state school doesn't mean you're not going to go work at a nice, super high end, giant international law firm. So that's my advice there.
Well, beautifully said, wonderfully said. Don't be an asshole. It's the best advice you could ever give anyone ever. And it allows me to curse on this podcast for once in my life. So, Johnathan, thank you so much for doing this, because that is the episode, that is the podcast. So thank you for coming on here, spreading your wisdom, spreading your experiences. And for everyone out there listening, thank you for tuning in. Be sure to check us out, lawyersinthemaking.substack.com, lawyers in the making, one word, substack.com, and I will see you all in the next